So welcome to League TV. We are pleased to welcome State Senator Devin LeMahieu as our first guest to this new series featuring current and prospective elected officials. I'm Lauren Rose Hoffland. Senator LeMahieu is a Republican member of the Wisconsin State Senate representing District 9, which encompasses parts of Sheboygan, Manitowoc, and Calumet counties. LeMahieu was elected to the State Senate in 2014. And his current term ends in January 2023. Devin graduated from Sheboygan County Christian High School, received a BA in Business Administration and Political Science from Dordt University in Sioux Center, Iowa, and is the publisher of the Lakeshore Weekly. He was a Sheboygan County Board Supervisor from 2006 to 2015. With the presidential election only months away, we asked Senator LeMahieu to talk to us about voter registration and access, a subject he knows quite a bit about and a subject about which the League of Women Voters is very passionate. So I'd like to start with our first question. In the 2015-2016 legislative session, Senator LeMahieu, you were one of the co-sponsors of SB 295, which allowed Wisconsinites to register to vote online. Can you tell us why you felt this was important legislation?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I appreciate you inviting me to your call here today. My first two sessions in the legislature, I was privileged to chair the Senate Committee on Elections. And at the time, the Assembly chairperson was Representative Kathy Bernier, who is a former county clerk. So with her, I worked on a couple different bills dealing with Wisconsin election law, and SB 295 was one of them. I was actually the Senate author on the bill. And the importance of that was just adding another tool in the toolbox for voters to register to vote. As you guys all know, in Wisconsin, we already had same-day registration. We figured using 21st century technology to give eligible voters the opportunity to register to vote online was an important tool. The bill also uses technology to through ERIC to clean up voter rolls and make sure that we have accurate voter rolls. Additionally, the bill made a couple of other important changes. Two of them were allowing veteran IDs to be a form of voter ID at the polls, and allowing nursing home intake documents to also be used as a form of ID for nursing home residents who would like to vote.
That was quite a big change. You just mentioned ERIC, which is the Electronic Registration Information Center. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and why that was included in the bill?
Sure. When we first had the bill drafted, there were only 14 states who were members of ERIC. And ERIC is the multi-state system or consortium that's meant to assist states in maintaining official and accurate voter rolls. So when we had the bill drafted, there were only 14 member states. Now there's actually 30 member states plus the District of Columbia. So it's great that more states are getting involved in the ERIC system. And what it does is uses the Social Security Administration and other state member agencies to identify voters who moved from state to state, voters who, if there's duplicate entries across state lines, to help clean that up, and also people who may have passed away. So it's a useful tool in making sure that in Wisconsin, our voter rolls are accurate and secure.
Very good. So in our work registering first-time voters, we often find that limiting online registration to only people who have a current driver's license or a state ID can be a hurdle. You mentioned that the SB 295 also opened up registration to veterans using a veteran's ID and nursing home registration. So thank you for that. But is there any plan to further expand online registration as other states have done to include other forms of acceptable proof of residency documents? So other states we know are using hunting licenses, student IDs, and utility bills. And if we do go to that, will that require more legislation?
Yes, that would require more legislation. The reason when we were working on this bill that we chose state IDs and driver's licenses is because we already have those state databases. So it's essentially pairing up the DMV voter list or the DMV registration list with the polling information. So if we'd add other forms of ID, we'd need to make sure that there's some sort of identifiable mark or number with those. For example, utility bills. I don't know how we would actually true that up with utility companies to make sure that there's not a duplication process. So, I mean, if we would open it up more, like I said at the beginning, it would require more legislation, and we need to figure out a way to do that securely and make sure that that information is accurate.
Very good. You mentioned just now about the DMV, and so I'm going to ask you a question I was going to ask you a little bit later. But while we're talking about the ease of online voter registration, what would it take for the Wisconsin legislature to support automatic voter registration for all eligible 18-year-olds through the DMV or another state agency?
Right. That's a great question. That's commonly referred to as motor voter, using the National Voter Registration Act. To preface this question, so Wisconsin is a very voter-friendly state. We're typically in the top 5 states, sometimes top 2 or 3 with voter participation, which is great. And I think part of that is because we do have same-day registration, and now paired with another tool with online registration, it gives voters that opportunity to either vote on election day or register ahead of time to make sure that they can vote and get their absentee ballot and things like that. One thing that being a member of ERIC does is it identifies people who have moved or are in the state who are not registered to vote. And every 2 years, the Elections Commission sends out postcards to these voters. So that gives them another opportunity to, and the information on those postcards tells them where they can register to vote, how they can register to vote, and things like that. So I'm getting roundabout to answering your question, but if we would use that, it would require a lot of changes to state law. We have some very unique instances in state law. So using motor voter or the National Voter Registration Act, it would require not just state agencies, but federal agencies in Wisconsin and local agencies to have that registration information available. So it'd require a lot of changes at the local level. So we would have to look at, the expense of that for local municipalities. It's not just DMV, it's places that provide public assistance and things like that. So all those systems would have to be trued up. So it'd be quite an undertaking in Wisconsin state law. And since, we do have very high voter participation in Wisconsin already, and we do have same day registration, I'm not sure that all those changes would be needed.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So the, speaking of making it easier, and the My Vote website made it easier for those with internet access and state IDs to register. But we worry about other eligible voters who don't have internet access. At our Mead Public Library here in the city of Sheboygan, we have a free voter registration kiosk. Would you support allocating funds to all Wisconsin public libraries to dedicate a computer for online voter registration?
Yeah, that's another interesting question. So right now, public libraries are funded mostly at the municipal and county level. However, the state budget does help fund libraries. In the last budget cycle, I serve actually in the Joint Finance Committee as well, so I got the opportunity to be part of crafting this budget. But during the last election cycle, we actually increased public library funding by $2 million. So, having that kiosk at Mead Library is great, but, you'd have to consider, does the Random Lake Library need a, dedicated kiosk? What's the demand in Random Lake? In a small community like that, where do you draw that line? And like I said, I don't think I actually said this, but voters can also go to their local clerk and get that information, request a paper ID. So there's multiple ways where someone can get that registration form. And so if Mead Library is offering a dedicated kiosk, that's awesome. But it's adding more state mandates on the entire library system. That's something we'd have to take serious consideration over.
Yep, that's a balancing act, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, and thank you for increasing library funding, by the way. So do you have any other plans or thoughts on how Wisconsin can make it easier for eligible citizens to register to vote? And I think you've covered quite a few right now, but is there anything in the works that maybe we haven't heard about?
There is nothing to my knowledge. This last session, I actually did not chair the elections committee. As I mentioned, Representative Bernier was the assembly chair, and she is now Senator Bernier this last session. So she is, like I mentioned, a former county clerk, and so she wanted to chair the elections committee. So I let her, or I didn't let her, but I mean, she does a great job
Yeah.
working on elections. She's very knowledgeable and understands it very well. So I thought it'd be great for her to be chairing that committee. So I haven't been as involved with election law in the last 2 years, but if there's anything we can do while making sure that it's obviously it's important that people exercise their right to vote, and any tool that we can give to help assist that, as long as it's secure and accountable, I'm obviously open into looking into that.
Thank you. So in this highly unusual year, which has resulted in us having an interview in this way, with high rates of absentee voting due to COVID-19, do you think it would be wise to require all clerks to provide locked drop boxes for voters to ensure timely and secure delivery of ballots?
Once again, I think there's about 1,800 different towns and municipalities around the state of Wisconsin. One of the great things about our elections is they're very decentralized, and local clerks, have the ability to make different choices, which is best for their communities. The Elections Commission does have a document on the Bipartisan Elections Commission has a document on, how to set up these drop boxes, the procedures and protocols for them. And under their recommendation, it's for every 15 to 20,000 voters to have a drop box or lock box. And so would it make sense, for example, the village of Adel, which has maybe 200 voters in a presidential election, to require them to have a drop box? That's another very interesting question. I think it's great when municipalities do set these up, especially the more urban areas where there's a high traffic flow in this situation. So a blanket mandate statewide might not make sense, but it's great that local municipal clerks are taking that initiative, following the recommendations of the Elections Commission, and setting those up around the state.
Yeah, I agree. So in closing, is there anything else you'd like to share about voter registration and the November elections?
No, I think there's being out and about in the community recently. There's obviously a lot of energy and interest in this fall's elections. So it should be an interesting election season. The commercials are already blasting frequently on TV and over the internet and things like that. So, as a legislator myself, someone who's involved in politics, these are interesting times, but it's campaign season is always a fun time.
Yes, it is. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today and to help us better understand the issues surrounding voter registration and access in the state of Wisconsin. Devin, do you want to leave us with if somebody wants to get in touch with you? I know you're easy to find online, but is there an email address or a phone number that if somebody had some follow-up questions, they could contact you?
Sure. My email is sen for Senator, sen.lemahieu, LEMAHIEU @legis.wi.gov, or you can just Google me. My website is senatordevin.com.
Thank you very much. Well, have a good rest of the day. Put your parka on. It's chilly out there. But thank you for being the first one to let us try out this new format. I think it worked out well. We didn't freeze up once. So that's good. And you have a good day, Devin.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.